Anna's fingers brushed a rogue skein of wool wedged behind her dresser, dusty, forgotten, like her first winter in New York. 15 years ago, that tangled mess had been her lifeline. Now, 55, she smirked remembering how she'd knit mittens so lumpy pigeons mistook them for breadcrumbs. Back then, farmers' markets were minefields of mispronounced cheeses. Now she ran a knitting circle where newcomers stitched confidence into every row. Skeins became safety nets, dropped stitches inside jokes. Her apartment smelled of lanolin. Anna's fingers brushed a rogue skein of wool, its pebbled texture like cobblestones back in Vilnius, familiar yet distant. 55 years of calluses knew how to loop yarn into order, but New York's bustle still tripped her up sometimes, a clumsy step on subway stairs. She'd arrived clutching needles like lifelines, half expecting town to unravel her. Instead, she'd knit herself into its seams. Farmers' markets became her classroom. Between honey stalls and overpriced kale, she'd hesitantly try new words, mangling cinnamon into something that made vendors grin. Home was a cramped studio, but her knitting circle, women from Damascus, Lagos, Seoul, stretched its walls. They traded stitches and slang, turning drop-stitch mistakes into inside jokes. Wool became their common tongue, each skein a bridge. Anna's deepest fear wasn't loneliness but becoming invisible, a ghost in a place lit by ambition. She'd watched her mother fade into silence after leaving home. Memory, like unspun fiber, needed anchoring. So she knit scarves too bright to ignore, weaving in flecks of Lithuanian flax. Strangers stopped her on sidewalks to ask about patterns. By winter, her circle had a booth market, their wares tagged with origins, pearls of Persia, knit one, sip chai. Anna laughed puns, her accent lighter now. Town hadn't softened, but she'd learned its rhythm row by row. Anna's fingers brushed a rogue skein of wool, its deep crimson unraveling like tangled threads of her new life. 55 and stubborn as a dropped stitch, she'd scoffed when her daughter suggested knitting to ease loneliness. But here she was, clutching mismatched needles, a Brooklyn farmer's market, drawn to a booth where women laughed over steaming chai, their hands flying over yarn like seasoned conductors. A sign wobbled in breeze, stitch and sip, newcomers welcome. Her first scarf looked more like a lopsided flag of surrender, but no one judged. Instead, a silver-haired woman named Maritza, knitting since Salvadoran Civil War, showed her how to turn mistakes into patterns. Knit 2, Purl 1, became Anna's mantra, each loop a tiny rebellion against feeling invisible. Skeins piled up in her apartment, vibrant as languages swirling around their circle, Ukrainian curses over tangled yarn, Farsi jokes about stubborn wool, her own Polish sighs when she forgot to count rows. Months in, woman noticed shifts. Her English, once halting, now wove through conversations as smoothly as her needles through merino. She bartered scarves for jars of kimchi from a Korean vendor, traded mittens for storytelling tips from a Syrian grandmother. That wool, scratchy first, then softening with time, became her anchor. Not just yarn, but proof that things could fray and still hold together. One icy morning, she taught a trembling teenager from Honduras to cast on. Girl's hands shook, but creator recognized fear. Like this, she murmured, guiding her fingers. No hurry. By sunset, girl had knitted a crooked but determined line, a beginning. Anna grinned. Lit? Absolutely. Not with youth's fire, but with quiet glow of embers that knew how to last. Anna's fingers brushed a rogue skein of wool, its deep crimson unraveling like doubts gnawing her. 55 years old and stubborn as a dropped stitch, she'd promised herself this knitting circle would be different. No more hiding behind scarves half-finished, no more pretending language barriers didn't sting. New York's farmers' markets had taught her one thing: roots took time, but they clung hardest where soil was foreign. She'd started Circle as a joke, really. Who hosted a stitch and bitch for folks who barely knew knit from purl? Yet every Thursday, her cramped apartment filled with newcomers clutching needles like lifelines. A Ukrainian grandmother muttered over tangled yarn. A Guatemalan teen fumbled with a dropped stitch, their laughter fraying edges of loneliness. Anna's own first sweater had been a lopsided disaster, but she'd worn it anyway, lit with defiance. Now, watching a Somali woman's brow furrow over a misread pattern, Anna saw her own early days, apartment applications filled out wrong, bus routes missed, that humiliating moment she'd mistaken cumin for cinnamon in a Brooklyn bakery. She nudged Wool skein toward woman, its twist echoing her own tight-wound resolve. Mistakes weren't dead ends, they were casting on anew. By summer, Circle had outgrown her living room. They met in a park near Union Square, their needles clicking in syncopated rhythm with city's pulse. Anna's latest project, a blanket pieced from everyone's scraps, sprawled across her lap, a patchwork of stubborn hope. She smirked, imagining some hipster mistaking it for ironic art. Let them. She knew truth, every knot, every dropped stitch, was a quiet rebellion against lie that belonging had an expiration date. Wind tugged loose threads as she packed up. 55 wasn't too old to start fresh. Neither was 70 or 90. Wool slid into her bag, still trailing a bit of crimson, unfinished, like all of them. Anna shouldered weight, grinning. Next week, they'd try cables. Anna's fingers brushed a rogue skein of wool, its vibrant crimson unraveling like threads of her own uncertainty. For months, needles had clicked in her cramped apartment, each stitch a silent plea for connection in a city that moved too fast for her accent. But today, that wool would become more than just yarn, it would weave her into fabric of this place. She'd stumbled upon a farmer's market in Brooklyn, where stalls overflowed with kale and artisanal honey, and a flyer for a knitting circle caught her eye. For newcomers, it read. Anna hesitated, her English still tripped over idioms, and her last attempt a sweater had sleeves of mismatched lengths. But something in that crimson skein, bold as a stoplight, dared her. With trembling hands, she set up a folding chair beside seasoned knitters, their chatter as rapid as subway trains. A woman with silver braids shot her a skeptical glance, eyebrows arched. Anna's fumbling cast on. Heat prickled her neck, but she focused, twisting stitches into a pattern she'd practiced nightly, a maple leaf, homage to her Canadian roots blended with New York grit. Then, disaster. A dropped stitch spiraled into chaos. Silver-braided woman snorted. Anna's stomach lurched, but instead of hiding, she laughed, holding up mess like a badge. Beginner's luck, she quipped, her accent thick but her grin wider. Circle paused. Then, laughter. Not her, with her. By sunset, Anna's maple leaf had morphed into a mitten, its design catching golden light. Someone snapped a photo. By morning, it had gone viral, immigrant mittens trending beside shots of her flushed pride. Strangers messaged, begging for pairs. Silver-braided woman, now a fast friend, nudged her with a wink, "You're lit, girl." Standing there, while clinging to her sweater like confetti, Anna exhaled. Skeins had become bridges. Every dropped stitch, every awkward phrase, they weren't flaws. They were her story. And as applause erupted from crowd, one thought bloomed, bright as that crimson yarn, I finally belong here. Anna's rogue skein of wool became her compass in a city that spun too fast. 55, she'd arrived clutching needles like lifelines, her stitches uneven as her accent. But Brooklyn's farmers' markets, where she first traded scarves for smiles, taught her yarn could weave more than fabric. It knit belonging. She launched a circle for newcomers, its rhythm steady as a pearl stitch. Week by week, mismatched chairs filled with hands that spoke different languages but shared one fluency, creation. A Syrian grandmother crafted socks with fiery determination, a Venezuelan teen fumbled through hats, laughing her own lopsided pom-poms. Anna guided without correcting, her odd habit of humming ABBA hits dissolving tension. Skeins piled up, their colors melting into a tapestry of resilience. One December, her group draped a 20-foot knitted banner across Borough Hall, a mosaic of their stories in wool. Tourists paused, locals cheered. Anna's scarf, now frayed from constant wear, bore witness. She'd thought she was teaching craft, but these threads had stitched something fiercer, a lifeline that pulled others ashore. Your turn. Grab needles, cast on courage.